Imprisonment is never a good time. And, you know, my first real shock was the conviction itself was not a shock because the threats I was receiving already, I kind of knew that, yeah, jail time was coming. But to imagine that it was going to be 4 years was hard. And I think what particularly got to me was the fact that the magistrate then, Feresi Chakanyuka, she was very bitter and particular, and she was behaving not necessarily as an official of the courts or of the judiciary. She was taking the case personally and threatening and shouting, spitting, and it was gullible. But of course, then they sentenced me to 4 years. And to imagine those 4 years in the conditions, it was really something else. But, you know, I really knew it that, you know, this is part of what I have to go through as I signed up to fighting for democracy and justice in Zimbabwe.
How is life in prison from a political point of view?
Life in prison is hell. I think it's a brush with hell to be in a Zimbabwean prison where it's like you virtually lose all your dignity. I mean, firstly, the sleeping space that you would be on is 30 centimeters. So you'd be sleeping on a space like 30 centimeters as this. And then not only that, you are locked up 17 hours a day from 3 p.m. to 8 a.m. And for those 17 hours that you are locked up, there's no running water, there's no toilet with running water in that small room. And it's 78 of you sometimes. To be in that space without a toilet for 17 hours was a hard thing. At the end of the day, my body had to learn and to adjust to not using the toilet for about 17 hours. You know, and it was gullible. And then, of course, also half the time, prisoners would have running stomachs and stomach upsets. And so they would be relieving themselves in that room at the corner where the toilet would be sitting, but without water and without nothing. Then they are relieving themselves there, and you have to do with that for the next 17 hours until the following day. So it was quite hard conditions to be in a Zimbabwean prison. And of course, some prisoners, you know, they boil cabbage or vegetables without cooking oil and with very little salt. So prisoners suffer from deficiency, a disease which is a result of deficiency of protein and fat, which is called pellagra. And then that disease eats up your skin. It eats and disintegrates your whole skin. And then to have, I mean, I saw people's chunks of skin peeling off. And then I had to take some of those prisoners to put them on my diet, on my diet that I was receiving from home, the food I would be receiving, and then I would actually share with them so that they would recover. And they quickly recovered. Interestingly, they quickly recovered. Once you put them on that diet, on my food, I would share with them my food. Then they would quickly recover. And it's horrible, actually, in a Zimbabwean prison.
Okay. As TZ, what do you think needs to be done for our prisons to change?
We've started pushing, actually. I mean, the whole change you would see in our Zimbabwean prisons would even go back to a change in government and a change in attitude and political will to solve the problems, because there's no political will to solve the problems. Our prisons fall under the Ministry of Justice, and you would wonder, are there no budgets? Is there no budgeting for them to buy cooking oil for all the prisons we have in this country? And so what we have done is TZ, already we have started engaging with organizations that we have asked actually to approach the Ministry of Justice so that they would speak to our prison, to look into the budgets, to look into potential supporters and sponsors of our prisons, to make sure that basic conditions that uphold human rights values are upheld in our prisons. So we've started actually speaking to several organizations which we are engaging to ask them and to front them actually to engage with the Ministry of Justice. But we still need further advocates. We need to be speaking like we are doing. We need to be sharing these and bring awareness to the conditions and state of our prisons in this country. It is very important. If we are to achieve change, then that advocacy is needed. And the engagement as well. with the relevant ministries. And one of the things that I realized when I was in the prisons is that we need to actually change the whole prison training. Our prisons are actually jails and prisons. They are not correctional facilities. We are still far away from the idea and attitude of building a correctional facility that is actually meant to correct your citizens so that they become more responsible citizens, which is what many prisons all over the world are getting to. But in Zimbabwe, it's still a jail, it's still a punishment, a facility with people who have not received probably sufficient training to make sure that they are correcting prisoners for that matter.
Okay, during the time when you are arrested, in the beginning of the case, you were together with Job Scala. Job Scala is now been in jail for more than 500 days. How, when you meet him, how is he like, and how do you come again with you being convicted, him still being in prison again?
It's crazy. For your own information, it's not, it's not only Job Scala that we were with at the onset. I was also arrested with Hopewell Chingono, and he was tried at the magistrates and, of course, in the High Court. And then all his cases were thrown out. And the same case under which I was convicted, Hopewell was actually set free. He was not even convicted on that case. So it also shows the inconsistency of our judiciary system. And Job is still being tried, and he's unjustly in remand prison. It's all crazy. It's all crazy. The tenets of a captured judiciary are evident in this country, and it's a shame. It's a shame, if anything, because you actually see that the courts are used as conduits to persecute political opponents of the regime, which is very unfortunate. A judiciary should be independent, and judiciary should uphold the constitution of the country, and the executive as well. All the three arms of the state have got a responsibility to uphold the constitution of Zimbabwe, which they make no effort at all to do.
Okay, your message to President Mnangagwa, Minister of Justice, Minister CMC, and towards the prison, what should they do to improve the systems in the prison?
I understand ED was at Harare Central Prison for quite some years as a condemned prisoner awaiting death sentence. If you go back to Harare Central Prison today, to the same cells under which he was, and to us being political prisoners, I stayed there. And you compare the prison probably in his days under Ian Smith and what it is now, it has deteriorated. And I tell you, even the sewage system has not been upgraded since the days of Ian Smith or the days of David Whitehead, when those, that prison was built in 1910. And from 1910 to now, there's been no improvement in facilities or whatever. And then my message to them is to say, you were there before in that prison, you know the conditions, you lived them, and are you satisfied that fellow Zimbabweans in the 21st century, 43 years down our independence, and we still go back to that prison under the same conditions, if not worse? I tell you, during their days, they would access books to read. When I was at Harare Central Prison, half the books I tried to read, they were turned back. One of them, I think, Justice is around here, and he knows it. They saw the picture of Abraham Lincoln and said, oh, that man looks like the guy who is on the $5 note in America. So someone says, oh, yes, it looks like. Says, oh, then it's a contraband, you can't read it. What kind of policy is that? So you have a prison that has got no respect for prisoners and human rights. And it's worse off. It's worse off than it was in the days of Ian Smith. And I would say to them, this is not the way to go. Absolutely. This is, no matter what you believe, no matter who you are, you need to make them better prisons, good facilities, consistent with the norms of human rights under the UN Convention, various conventions that we have signed. But here in Zimbabwe, our prisoners are like slaves, if not worse off than slaves, which is very unfortunate in the 21st century.
Okay, let's come back to the politics side. is TZ still alive after your incarceration? And also in 2021 you wrote on Twitter that Mr. Chamisa is a Triple C president, is a large following, and you are supporting him. Is TZ still alive after that? Well, because you did not contest in the 2023 elections, and there hasn't been much of activity from Transform Zimbabwe.
One of the efforts by the regime to send me away and imprison me is they wanted to weaken our organization and to make sure that they decimate us, which we refuse. We refused and we still refuse. Yes, the election was held when I was then in prison, and a decision by Transform Zimbabwe executive was reached that they were not participating in that election for various reasons, which they then proffered to the nation, which I largely agreed with. It's a decision that I largely agreed with, to say, under the condition the party was under then, it was not going to be wise then to participate. And of course, we also at that time they reached a decision that we support the best foot forward and the political parties and candidates who were presenting the best opportunity for the people of Zimbabwe to support and win the election, which we did. But Transform Zimbabwe, from there, we are, rebranding, we are rebuilding and restructuring to make sure that we are a formidable force which the people of Zimbabwe can identify with. We stand on an advantageous platform because already we're a party that has demonstrated its ability to fearlessness in confronting the situation in the country. We're a political party that has continued to speak out against corruption in the country, unlike no other political party. We're a political party that so much believes in action, to say we can't just be talking about these issues, let's do something. And we're also a political party that is issue-driven. The reason why I went to prison is that we identified issues back then in 2020 to say Zimbabweans are united by issues more than political party name tags and so on. And then we identified the issue of corruption. We pushed on the issue of corruption up until we called for anti-corruption demonstrations, which the regime felt was a huge threat to them. And then they picked us up, locked us up, and persecuted us like what happened. And that on its own, the ability of the party to identify issues that bring everybody together is a big step forward in redefining our politics. Our politics has been based on personalities, cultic sometimes, and so on. And Transform Zimbabwe is saying, let's build a new culture of politics, which of course proffers and demonstrates resilience, fearlessness, but at the same time bringing in a culture of accountability and making sure that leaders and political movements are subject to the will and direction of the people of Zimbabwe. And this is a culture that we are rebranding in Transform Zimbabwe. And yeah, you will see a lot of us down the line. Soon announcements will be made and you'll see a rebranded political party that is ready to serve the people of Zimbabwe.
Okay. There have been rumors which have been circulating around in the streets of politics, in the corridors of politics and everything, that Job Scanner and call others, they are creating a movement. Are you part of the Job Scanner movement?
I am not aware of that, and I'm not. Nothing has been brought to my attention as far as that movement is concerned. I was with Job Sikala in prison, and we were together at the courts, a couple of times, and we had a lot of chance and time to talk. And of course, what we discussed and talked is still between the two of us. And at the right time and appropriate time, we can always share with the nation. But I think I would say I'm not aware specifically of any such movement that is being built. And I think the best person to speak on that would be Job himself or his spokesperson. I'm sure he's aware of what is happening. Yeah.
Okay, let's come back to the current politics, the current issues. There have been recalls in Parliament. A lot of opposition MPs have been recalled. What's your take, what's your view on the side of citizens, on the side of a person who voted for his councillor and later on to be recalled by an individual?
This is a huge attack on the legislature. How a proper state should function is that there should be separation of powers between the three arms of the government, which is the executive, the legislature, and your judiciary. But now what you have is that the executive has captured the judiciary, and now the executive is enforcing and capturing the legislature. They want even to control the laws. They want to make sure they're in control of the laws by attaining 2/3 majority and do what they want so that they control whatever happens within the legislature. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable, and outrageous to say people vote in a constituency, they have their representative, and then the next week you are recalling them. And then they believe an individual without a basis. I mean, this is outrageous. This is why we say this regime has moved from beyond being just a criminal state to an oligarchy. I mean, which is not prepared to listen to anyone, to listen to any ideas, and even also to listen to the will of the people of Zimbabwe. This is unacceptable as a citizen. And even in a democracy, you can't have a democracy functioning like this. This is medieval. This is Stone Age politics that ZANU-PF is practicing. It has never been practiced anyway. Even in 1200 in any state, you would not get this kind of kindergarten behavior and politics.
What's your take on the current economical situation, and what's your opinion on it?
Unfortunately, what evil regimes do is, they loot the economy, they plunder resources, they take control of all the resources. But then when it comes to the key and important issues in that country, they always go back and punish citizens. Despite the endowment this country has, the resources we have as a country, the human capital we have as a nation, and so on, they loot and plunder. But still on their budgeting, they impose heavy taxing on the citizens who already don't have access to the resources that they have. And it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. I mean, the last budget is a demonstration of how unwilling ZANU-PF is to play their part and role in rebuilding this country. They want the burden squarely to be on the people of Zimbabwe and on ordinary citizens, which is very unfortunate. To double the toll gate, for instance, is blind to the hardships that the people of Zimbabwe are facing. The house taxes, I mean, those are some of the very reasons why people took up arms and fought the Smith regime. They've been overburdened by the taxes from the Land Husbandry Act and so on. And they're exactly putting people back into those conditions. They are recreating the conditions of the 60s that led people to take up arms and fight the Smith regime. And it's amazing. And it's also amazing how blind they are to all that. They don't even care. They just keep doing it because they feel they won't be resisted enough, and they don't care.
Mr. Ngarivhume, with the economic challenges which the country is facing, are we able to meet President Mnangagwa's Vision 2030?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, the economy itself is an albatross around this government and state, and there's no way they can shake themselves off from that albatross. It's what will eventually get them down. They can do the mega deal hyper and propaganda that we are signing these deals, we have signed this and that. Health has improved, what they view, they say all this nonsense and rubbish. But the truth is, the state of the economy and the state of the nation is there for all Zimbabweans to see. Zimbabweans know that their lives have continued to deteriorate. Many Zimbabweans are leaving the country to go and work in the diaspora in very, very unfortunate jobs. Some of these Zimbabweans, some of our fellow citizens are overworked. Some of them, they are doing the kind of jobs that no other citizens of the world are willing to do. Zimbabweans are taking them up. And hardworking citizens who then, of course, send that money back as remittances and so on to support families back home, and which is what also government half the time abuses, in terms of the exchange control rate and so on. So the struggle for Zimbabweans is real and is there. And I don't see any way that ZANU-PF can solve it given the fact that they have created the same horrible conditions for the people of Zimbabwe. They won't be able to take Zimbabwe out of it.
Okay. In the 2024 budget, ministers, they are working on a plan to export skills being trained here in Zimbabwe to abroad. What's your take on it? Is it something that as a country we should pursue, or maybe we should keep developing our country through our own selves?
I mean, it's really, first as a policy, it's difficult to say how such an exporting of skills would be a successful policy in any country. It has worked very well in countries like China, maybe the more developed countries, where you export your skills, and through that, then you also get to access resources at the end of the day. That would be your target. But for a country like Zimbabwe, where there are no opportunities for work, there are no opportunities. I mean, every year, imagine how many graduates we have from the various universities and how many are able to use those skills in our industry. We've got a dead economy without any production, because what grows an economy is production. But there's no production in here. We even import the toothpicks that we use in this country. You know, just a couple of trees, well shaped and put in a plastic paper. It's made in Taiwan, made in China. All the toothpicks, just go check. You see. So we have not been able to use our own skills. Whilst if this country was proper and everything going on well, yes, exportation of skills is quite important. And it's critical because you then also expand and interact your skills and so on. But in any case, Zimbabweans are already doing very well in terms of skills elsewhere. You know, if you look at all the developed countries and the big international companies and consortiums that are doing well, you find Zimbabweans in there, which is actually a huge encouragement to show actually our ability in terms of skills management and skills acquisition we have as a country. But of course, our biggest letdown is a damaged economy and a damaged non-producing economy that is good for nothing. I mean, Zimbabweans acquire skills, but we've never had an opportunity to use those skills internally. If anything, we've just used them externally. And they've been stopping nurses from going abroad. The health sector workers have been stopped from going abroad by laws that they are trying to use actually to stop a brain drain, you know, which is also equally unfortunate and against norms of human rights and the right of people to determine what they want to do in life.
Maybe lastly, the by-elections are around the corner, and your party did not participate in it. Why, and how do Zimbabweans need to?
We can't be part of this sham and scam that ZANU-PF is doing to acquire 2/3 majority. You know, we can't sanitize them. You know, we know they are on the path to make sure that they acquire the 2/3 majority, and that path is destructive and highly disregarding to the people of Zimbabwe who recently were at polls, and those polls were compromised in any case. And then for us to participate in those by-elections, to try to sanitize this regime is a no-no for us. You know, we at this stage, you know, I wouldn't expect, given what ZANU-PF is doing, I wouldn't expect any member of the opposition to be in parliament. I mean, this is time we all withdraw from any kind of engagements with this regime as far as parliamentary democracy is concerned. They've shown complete disregard to the views of the people of Zimbabwe. They are recalling their own parliamentarians, which they recently elected, and some councillors and so on. So why then would you want to engage with them any further? You should completely disengage with them so that they remain discredited, themselves alone in parliament, in council, and everywhere. I would call for a complete withdrawal so that you don't aid them, because you only give them a face and a level of credibility which they need in SADC, which they need in the African Union, to say, oh, there's democracy in Zimbabwe, look at our parliament, we have opposition parliamentarians and so on. Once they achieve their 2/3 majority, they stop the recalls. And of course, once they stop the recalls, they would then throw away the people they've been using in achieving that. That's typical of that regime. We know it. There's throw you away as soon as they finish using you. And it's unfortunate. But unfortunately, in terms of strategy, we are not strategic enough as the opposition then to know that, no, this is time to completely disengage. Then you would hugely discredit them. Imagine what the UN would say, SADC, the African Union, the West, the East, and everybody, to have a parliament for the next 5 years that you have only ZANU-PF. That's what you would need to send a strong statement. But what are we doing? The few parliamentarians that are spared, then they go back to parliament at the mercy of ZANU-PF. They are now completely in charge. They have the 2/3. They have what they want to do what they want exactly. And for me to imagine that we can lack strategic focus to withdraw parliamentarians and to make sure that we have nothing to do with them, it sometimes pains me to say, then how are we playing our politics in this country?
Anyway, lastly, maybe you'll find a ways to Zimbabweans, to ordinary citizens who are in the streets of Harare, Bulawayo. What's next from Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe is our heritage, fellow Zimbabweans. Zimbabwe is our country. We own it. It's not owned by ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF, yes, was one of the leading liberation struggle parties. Through ZIPRA and ZANLA, all Zimbabweans contributed. We contributed in our own way. Those of us who were still young, born at the time of independence, and many, we all contributed in our way. When I was on holiday in the villages, I went through and talked to families who lost members who were either sold out and wrongly killed during the liberation struggle. But overall, you then appreciate that a struggle is not owned by individuals. I read a book called The Guerrilla Warfare, Zimbabwe's Guerrilla War, when I was in prison. One of the things that I got to appreciate is that a liberation struggle is owned by the people. And the problem comes when people try to own it and say, we are the masters and you are our servants, which is typically what ZANU-PF is doing. And that is unacceptable. So I want to correct that narrative and say to the people of Zimbabwe, especially the young people, Zimbabwe is our heritage. Let's all come together and let's not give up on our country. Let's not give up on Zimbabwe. When we look at them, when we look at ED, when we look at all those guys, we may look at them and think they are too powerful for us. No, they are not. We can come together and make sure we shape our own country the way we want it. Accountability must be the order of the day. We must make sure that we build a nation and a government that is accountable. We have a people that are willing to be accountable, the people of Zimbabwe. A fight against corruption is just. A demand to say what has happened to the gold mafia people who have smuggled gold, what has happened of them, is a just question that the people of Zimbabwe need to ask. And we want to make sure that we don't give up on this fight. Don't give up on the fight. Don't give up on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is our heritage. If we keep fighting, one day we'll get there, and it should be possible to build a country that we are proud of. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.